Run, party, repeat. Welcome to the East Coast Adventures Dirt and Vert podcast, where we talk all things running, racing, and training to help you get ready for your next big adventure.
Learn from our successes and our failures, and have fun at the same time. Join us right here every week with inspiring guests who share their captivating tales from the trails. And remember, nobody cares.
Run faster. All right, welcome back to this is East Coast Adventures with the Dirt and Vert podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Matt.
And I'm Mike.
And we have a special guest today, Walter Handloser, who has broke Guinness World Record, ran the Triple Crown of 200s, and is also a Vol State finisher this year. Very interesting guy with a huge bunch of accomplishments, 100-milers, definitely the 200-milers. And we're very pleased to have you as our guest today. Walt, if you don't care, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into running.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for having me on. Well, first thing I should probably clarify, because I always, this is like one of those common things that people tend to think about what I did, and that is that they use the G word, they use Guinness. So this is something I discussed when I was first planning to break the record, and the record is the most 100-mile races finished in a single year. And I thought, okay, well, what's the current record, right? And as I looked around, I realized there wasn't really any formal place where this was recorded. Turns out that Guinness doesn't care about this particular thing. Guinness they don't do records, and this is their phrasing on this, they don't do records for particular distances of ultramarathon. So we'll do something like the most ultramarathons run, or the most ultramarathons run in a year, but they're not going to do anything like the most 100-mile races finished in a year, which is funny because they'll do like most number of baseball bats broken in a minute, but they won't do, the most number of 100 miles.
That's a big difference, man. Just wow, I didn't realize that. So
yes,
it's
a community
record.
Yeah, it's a community kept record, and it's been a community kept record from the very beginning. It has like a long history going back to when 13 was the record, and at that time there were about 1,300 milers in the U.S. And now there's more than that. There's over 200 of them. So it's a history. It's a pretty long running record, and but Guinness has nothing to do with it. So the G word does not get involved.
Yeah, well, and I believe the year that you broke the record, the previous guy that had it was Ed the Jester.
Ed the Jester, yep, Ed Eddinghausen.
Yeah, he's a cool dude as well.
Oh, he's a very cool dude. He when I first was thinking about breaking it, I called him. And I was really worried. I was really stressing out when I was going to call him because I thought he'd just be angry. And I'd met him on a few situations, and I knew he was a cool guy. But it's one thing to be a cool guy in the abstract, and it's another thing to call someone up and say, "Hey, I'm going to take your record. What can you tell me about how to do this?" To my great pleasure, though, like many other people in the ultra community, he was fantastic about it. He gave me information on logistics. He told me how he did it. He told me what he needed to do and who he contacted. He was always super open to help. So yeah, the ultra running community is always fantastic, and this was no exception whatsoever. So, but yeah, you were curious about how I got started running. And might as well go back to the beginning. So like when I was a kid, I grew up, I was always like the fat kid. I was overweight for basically the first 28 years of my life, almost 29, and sometimes extremely overweight. So when I was a little kid and I was in junior high, that's when I first encountered running. When I joined the junior high cross country team as the tubbiest little kid on the cross country team, I didn't do anything worth mentioning aside from I got lost at a track meet, or I got lost at a cross country meet once, and I don't know where I wound up, but I somehow got back to the finish line. I never finished a formal race during that time, but I knew that I kind of found out at that point that I loved running, but I was always just too heavy for it. And then I went into high school, and during high school I played football, and those of you who played football know that they only want one thing out of football players, and that's get as big as you can possibly get, lift
Yeah.
more, eat more, sprint, but don't bother running long distances. So I got up to, those of you who know me know I'm not terribly tall. I'm 5'6", and when I graduated high school, I was 250 pounds, and then I got as high as 275 pounds, which is big for a 5'6" guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when I was 28, I was in just absolutely terrible shape. And I kind of looked at myself and I said, that the time is really getting short. Like the window within which you can become something other than just the fat guy is closing. I mean, after 30, this is only going to get harder.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to myself, I'm going to make a pledge. I am going to, when I turn 30, I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. And that same day, I joined a gym, and I went to that gym for the next basically 6 years of my life. But over the first 10 months, I lost 100 pounds. And I've now kept that weight off for over a decade. So, yeah, it was a bit of a journey. And once I had kind of lost all that weight, a person I worked with at the time, and a thoroughly bad influence, said, "Hey, you should try and run a marathon." And I was like, I tried to run a half marathon once, and when I finished, I felt like I'd just been beaten with a bat. Like I don't think it's really for me. Like I know I loved running back in the day, but like it's just not. I'm not gonna do that. But of course, because I'm a stubborn bastard, in the back of my mind that just lodged, and I couldn't get that out of my head. Like, oh well, I think I'm in good shape, and I think I'm so cool. But if I was really cool, I'd be able to run this marathon. Like that's the real thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I went and I tried to run a marathon. The first marathon I tried to run was the Santa Barbara Veterans Day Marathon in November. Now, those people who listen from California will know that November is among the hottest months of the year on the coast, because it's that time when you're no longer getting the fog in the morning. Everything's starting to dry out, and so you're just getting sun like all morning along the coast, and it's gonna hit 80, 90 degrees. And so I tried the Santa Barbara marathon, and I didn't eat or drink for 23 miles. Wow. And then collapsed by the side of the road at 23 miles. And I'm laying there by the side of the road just thinking, this is just terrible. I feel like I just want to die right now. And someone offered me like coconut water and a Kind bar. And I was like, I don't think I can actually eat these things right now. I don't think I can take that in. Had the gall to say like, well, you just got to go up this hill and it's 3 more miles to the finish. I'm like, I can't stand right now. What good does that do me? Like, I can't get up. If I could get up, I'd get up. I'm on my back. I'm down. I'm good. So I ended up getting driven.
Was that like a personal choice not to drink or eat, or you just didn't know?
I think he just wanted to make it harder. See how
Right.
hard this can be.
I'm gonna go run a marathon. Yeah. Turns out you can't just
I
wing
love the
some things.
confidence.
So, yeah,
I
right.
don't think he didn't like the confidence, did he?
No.
So you didn't finish that marathon?
I did not finish that. My very first running experience was a DNF. So at least I got that out of the way early.
Yeah, definitely. Have you went back and finished that one since?
Well, so I get this ride to the finish line, and there's this lady who put the idea of a marathon in my head in the first place, waiting for me, 'cause she's my ride home, and she's giving me this look like, you moron. Get in the back of the car, and I get in the back of the car, and it's her and her husband up front, and I'm riding back just feeling like I'm gonna die, and she hands me back a cookie and a chocolate milk, and I'm like, no, I can't eat those either. I'm sorry. She's like, just eat them. No, that wasn't a request. Eat them. So I shove them down my throat as best I can, And about 5 minutes after I ate them, I felt like I could run that marathon backwards. That was the only problem, was literally calories. So um, so I go, okay, well, it kicked my butt, but I'm not the kind of person that will let that stand. If something kicks my butt, I'm gonna go back and I'm going to finish that exact same thing. I
Mhm.
Love
can't
it.
do another marathon. I can't do any. No, it has to be that one. So I almost immediately sign up for next year's Santa Barbara Marathon. And this time I get a training plan. I learn how to eat on the run, and I go back and I finish it the second time around. And thank goodness I did, because that was the last time the Santa Barbara Marathon ever happened.
Oh, nice.
Oh
So
wow.
I would have lost that chance, and then that would have
Yep.
haunted me forever. So, but in the interim, a guy at my gym during this year when I'm training, a guy at my gym says, I think you should run a 100-mile race. And I was like, are you stupid? Like,
I just DNF'd the marathon.
yeah, I just didn't have to marathon. You think I should do four of them now? Four of them, right? Is that what I'm hearing? But of course, dumb me gets lodged in the back of my brain, and this guy is the perfect person to get it lodged in my brain, because this is a 60-something dude who's had um, a heart valve replacement. Both of his kidneys are shot. He has a third kidney inserted into his abdomen that's doing all the work.
Wow.
And this guy still beasts through 100-milers. And I'm like, if he can do it, I have no excuse whatsoever not to at least try it.
Mhm.
And so that got lodged in my head. And then I guess the rest is kind of history. There's more to the story, of course. There's the story of my first 100-miler and all that. But when I ran my first 100-miler, it was an experience, and it was an experience such that it told me where the rest of my life was going. Like, ultra running for the first time was eye-opening.
Hmm.
It was everything I had. Um, as a kid, I always had like fantasies about being off on one's own and just with nothing else but your own ability and whatever you can scavenge, and this was as close as I'm ever going to get to that. I'm not a savannah hunter or anything like that. I'm not living off the land. The closest I'm ever going to get is to push myself through an ultra, and as it turns out, 100-mile plus stuff is just exactly what gets my brain going. So yeah.
So in that interim between the marathon and your first 100-miler, did you run anything in between those distances, or did you literally go from marathon to 100 miles?
So I finished that first marathon, and and that was in 2014, I'm tempted to say. And then I said to myself, I really like that. No, that was the end of 2013. It was the end of 2013, and I said, I really like that. I think I'm going to try many more of those. And so what I did is I planned a year where I was going to run a marathon a month.
Mm-hmm.
And by about halfway through that year, I was bored to tears with marathons, because I think once you've seen one road marathon, you've seen every road marathon. And I was like, and I kept hearing of these things about, like, oh, there's trail runs too, and there's longer distances, and I was like, oh, I might, this could be. And by the end of the year, I was subbing in 50Ks for the marathons, and I was switching between road and trail, and I was thinking about going longer. And when I finally did go longer, my first longer distance that wasn't just a 50K, was the American River 50-miler in Folsom. Um, and that was a miserable experience. 50s remain a truly miserable experience to me. I never learned how to strategize or figure them out. I kind of figured if I didn't like them, I wasn't really going to like 100Ks either. Turns out I was right. So I skipped directly from 50 miles to 100 miles. And the way I got that's also sort of funny, because it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to do a 100-miler, I got to learn about these things, right? I'm one of those people where I got to do research. So I learned my lesson with the marathon. I can't just wing it. So I'm going to do some research. I should probably go volunteer at one. Which one should I go volunteer at? I know nothing about 100-milers. Which race should I go? Google it a little bit. What's this? Western States. Okay, people seem to like this Western States thing. maybe I'll go volunteer there. And I start to read more and I realize it's kind of a big deal. And my mind thinks, okay, well, like you probably can't just like volunteer there. They probably have qualification standards, even just to volunteer. I'm thinking in my brain. And so I'm thinking, how can I get in and volunteer there? And so I contact a race director friend of mine. I'm like, do you know any way to like actually volunteer at this place? And she, the much more experienced runner who had already run Western States at that point, she said she thinks, oh, Walt knows what he's talking about. He must not want one of the standard volunteer spots. He must want one of the like premium volunteer spots. I didn't. I just wanted a volunteer spot. I just didn't know you could just go get them. So she hooks me up with a volunteer coordinator who gets me like one of the coveted spots at the registration desk the day before the race. And I'm like, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I go there and my first time doing Western States, I I did the registration desk on the first day, went to Duncan Canyon and worked Duncan Canyon on the second day, and then overnight I went down to Ruckatucky in a full head-to-toe dry suit and stayed in the river for 5 straight hours, ushering people across the river. And I realized from that point on that like that was, I mean, I said to myself at that point, like I cannot do anything else during Western States. Like I must continue with Western States. I will be there. I will be volunteering every single year, and I have been every year since. But that, of course, led me to like, how do I run this thing? Like, how do I get into this thing? And I looked around and I realized there's a qualification system, and I had planned to run Zion in 2017. That was going to be my first 100. But I was like, but if I do Zion in 2017, I won't be able to put my name in the hat for the 2017 Western States. I got to plan something sooner than that. So, okay, well, how about if I do Rio del Lago? Okay, I can do Rio del Lago. That's a race. That's a qualifier. So I sign myself up for Rio del Lago, and I sit there and I think, wait a second, though, it's the last qualifier, and it'll be my first 100-miler. So if I mess that up, oh man, that's the only chance I'll get to qualify. I better sign up for another one. And so then I signed up for Run Rabbit Run. So now I had 2 qualifiers with a third in the second year, because Zion was a qualifier at that point. Don't know if it still is. So yeah, that's how my first 100 turned into my third, and that's how I got my name in the hat for Western States starting in 2017.
And
So
did you get to run Western States?
I have not gotten to run Western States. I have been in the lottery ever since.
Wow.
This year, I finally got on the wait list. Finally,
I know
54th on the wait list.
me and
So
Mary was watching, and because she was on the wait list too, and she messaged me and she said, "Walt's on the wait list." I was like, "Good for Walt. That's awesome."
yeah,
Hopefully, I mean
yeah.
that probably means you've got a really good chance of getting in. Hopefully,
Hopefully, 54th is borderline. 54th could make it or could not, but you know the only thing you can do in a situation like that is train like you're going to run it and show up anyway.
Yep.
So,
that's progress. At least you're on the wait list.
Yep.
mhm. And if I don't make it, next year I'll have 128 tickets and a better chance. So, you know.
Wow.
Wow.
So Run
Tickets.
Rabbit's that's a pretty hard 100-miler, right?
It's harder nowadays than it was when I ran it. So in the day when I ran it in 2016, it was a lot more Jeep road. Um, Colorado in general just has a lot of available Jeep road.
Mhm.
So you see a lot of ultras tend to use a lot of Jeep road, and what that means is you never really face too extreme a vert. You never really face things that a car can't take, right? Nowadays, they've rerouted the course to be more on the Continental Divide Trail. So you get a lot more time on single track now, a lot more vert. It's a more difficult race now, albeit shorter. Used to be 106 miles, now it's shorter, but so much more single track. It's a more difficult race. So yeah, it's a toughie. But it couldn't have been a better first race. I mean, the community that surrounds that race is really extremely positive. I mean, one of their gimmicks is you don't get your finish time until you hug the rabbit. Like, what kind of race is, what kind of serious race makes you hug the rabbit to get a finish time?
That's awesome.
They're very cool. They're very chill. You'd never suspect that they are some super competitive race with the largest prize purse in all of ultra running because they run it like it's a, local down home race. It's really just a great experience.
Having done all these now, Walt, is there something where you're more picky when you choose a 100-miler now, or do you still just kind of have a checkoff list that you just kind of like, okay, I've not run that one, or do you still hit repeats on some of them? Is there some of them that you just like, oh, that was so good, I've got to go back every year now?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I'll be running my fourth Uray 100 this coming year. I just ran my third Devil Dog. I've run 3 across the years. I've run 3 San Diego 100. Usually it has to have some, like, I'm going to be blunt. I don't really care about the course. The course could be amazing. The course could be terrible, but that's not what's going to make me come back to a race. The people are what's going to make me come back to a race.
Absolutely.
They're what makes it. So, and that's why I want to go back to Vol State. Like, what a great experience there, but what a terrible course, my God.
Well, you raise a hard course. I mean, that's a lot of
It's
elevation.
extremely hard. Yeah,
Did you make
42,000
it back
climb.
to Uray after Vol State this year, or did you not run it?
I made it back, but I was so destroyed that I just, I volunteered.
Okay.
It was not going to happen.
Was that the week after that you were supposed to run that, or what? You were supposed to run one the next weekend, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
were having van issues, and you were destroyed, and you
Yeah,
had a lot of stuff stacked against you.
yeah. I mean, if I had finished Vol State about a day faster, I probably could have gone over there and I could have run Uray. But being when I finished it, there just wasn't enough time to realistically drive over there and make it before the start. I actually arrived after the race started, so it just wasn't going to happen.
I remember on the bus ride, you're like, yeah, I got Uray next weekend. I'm like, next weekend? Like, we're going to do Vol State, and then he's going to go and do this crazy stuff?
I remember him saying he didn't know if his van was going to make it back.
Oh, yeah, his
He had
van.
engine problems too. So.
Yeah, my poor van. That problem didn't get fixed till months later. Yeah, I had to drive it at a maximum speed of like 60 miles an hour to many events since then. Finally got fixed. So yeah, my poor van
Well, you
puts up
said
with so
that
much
you
crap
didn't,
from me.
you didn't like 100Ks, but looks like you did. You did it the Sean O'Brien, but then it looks like you done the Georgia Death Race,
I've done the Georgia Death Race.
2017.
17. Yeah.
I'm ultra sign up stalking you right now. So
Okay, that's fine. That's a perfectly fine thing to do. There's all sorts of fun stuff that's not an ultra sign up. They don't have the spine on there, for example.
Wow, you've done that too.
Finished it once, DNF'd it once. Yep.
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one. It's a fun one though. It's and I plan on going back there again. It's a race where like it kind of calls to you after you've done it once. It's so wonderfully miserable that you're drawn back to it. I finished the spine and Vol State in roughly the same amount of time. So yeah.
What exactly is the spine? I mean, I've heard a little bit about it from your podcast, but from other podcasts you've been on.
So the spine is a race in England. It starts in Yorkshire. Specifically, it starts in this little tiny town of probably about 35 people called Idale. Which is on the edge of the oldest national park in England, which is Peak District National Park. And starting in Peak District National Park, you have this path called the Pennine Way. And the Pennine Way is the oldest national trail of the national trail system that they have. And I'm probably going to get called and corrected on that. This is just what I know off the top of my head. It runs from Yorkshire to Scotland and ends just across the border in Scotland. And it's 268 miles. But if you've ever been to northern England, you know that like nothing comes easy out there. No 1 mile is easy. The fells are immensely rocky and uneven. The Pennine Way is only partially what you might call it partially paved. By paved, I mean they've like helicopter dropped these gigantic stones that they line the trail with. Unfortunately, they're dropping them in a bog. So they drop them, and over time they just sort of submerge. So you're running through a bog up to your ankles, up to your mid calf in water for 5 straight days. You forget what the definition of dry is, and the only time you get dry is when it gets cold enough for everything to freeze. Because it's in winter. I should have mentioned it's in January, and sort of the interesting geography of England makes it such that the west side of the island stays relatively warm, whereas the east side of the island gets extremely cold. And as the Pennine Way goes north, it crosses over from west to east. So you're just getting colder and colder and colder. And by the end, even on the good years, everything is frozen. But this year, sorry, it was 2023. This year when I ran it, everything froze very early. We got early Ultra plummeted, and the ground froze, and the bog froze, and it was like a 200-mile ice capade until my foot finally gave out and I had to quit. So, yeah,
Well,
it was.
I watched there's a YouTube documentary on the spine, and I watched it, and it looks absolutely brutal. And there's some very steep climbs and the rocks you're talking about. It's incredible. What I mean, to finish that race is pretty impressive. I mean, it's got a low finish rate.
It does, usually about 30% finish rate. Yeah.
Wow.
It just looks like your gear itself would just be, typically so different for what we're used to, just the winter gear.
Yeah, the gear list is very extensive. You usually have to carry about a 30-liter pack to carry all of it. They want you to be able to, because in 268 miles, there's only 5 aid stations.
Wow.
So you're going up to 100K between aid stations.
That's 5 more than Vol State. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. And you don't see towns nearly as often because you're actually on trail.
Mm-hmm.
So you come across their pub system or their inn system. You come across inns and pubs occasionally, but they're few and far between. It is a lot like Vol State in the sense that the places along the route know that the spine runners are coming and make accommodations for them. Like there are places that normally would not be open in the middle of the night because they're in rural England, but they know that for the next 5 days, spine runners are going to be coming through, and so they'll get a local college student to man the place in the middle of the night, or just have an honor system going at their shop. So there are things like that, but it is considerably less supportive than Vol State just because there are fewer. You're not along a major highway. So the interesting thing is that you can, when you're in sort of the deep backcountry there, you can get a blizzard that just comes up out of nowhere, and they want you to have enough on you that you can create a camp, heat up food for yourself, and be safe from the elements for up to 3 days, which is how long it might take them to get to you.
Wow.
And so you're carrying a sleeping bag, a bivvy, full long base layers, a spare full long base layer, head to toe waterproof layer, a heavy mid layer, a pot to boil water in, a stove, fuel, 3,000 calories, utensils, a certain amount of water, a knife, a compass, a map, a GPS that is not your watch. Your watch does not count as the GPS for that. You also have to have your phone fully charged and something to recharge it with.
Wow.
Two headlamps. I'm going on and on because it's about 20 to 25 pounds worth of gear. It's a lot of gear.
Sounds like he's going on a cross-country camping trip.
Well, you should I said documentary, but you should watch one of those just look up the spine on YouTube. There's a lot of people that's recorded
Definitely have to
those,
watch
and
that.
it's
'Cause
crazy to watch.
That sounds painful.
I'm guessing when you got all that gear, it's kind of hard to run. It's more of
it's a shuffle.
Yeah.
You're doing the ultra shuffle, that's for darn sure. And plus the footing's so bad that, you learn to take every step like it's your last, because who knows whether it will be. I fell in up to my waist in water twice this year. Once the first time I did it, because you're in a bog. Who knows? Maybe that next step is a Then maybe there's a stone underneath that next puddle of water you're going to step in. Maybe there isn't. Maybe that's where there's a sinkhole. And so the
Wow.
sinkholes are fun. Yeah.
Well, it looks like you didn't spend much time in the 100 miles before you decided to do the Triple Crown here, is what I'm seeing. You
Yeah.
jumped from 2016 of doing your first 100 miler into 2017 of doing your first 200 milers. So
Why wait,
was that a
right?
goal?
No, it was an accident actually. So I knew by that point I had heard of the Triple Crown, and I thought, oh, that'd be really cool to run the Triple Crown. I should start looking into that. And I was signed up to run Pine to Palm in Oregon that year. And that year, Pine to Palm burned to the ground. So there was this major fire that destroyed the course, and they canceled the race. And at the last minute, I thought, well, what am I going to do? Took this time off. Maybe I should try one of the 200s because I know I want to try the Triple Crown at one point. So I should probably see whether I even like this distance. So I contacted Candace and I said, hey, is there a spot open in your race? And of course, because this was way back when, before people were doing all the 200s a lot, she's like, yeah, sure, just here's the cost, just pay it, and we got a spot for you. And so I ended up running it just as a last minute, oh, I'm running the 200 now. Yeah.
Well, and you
And that's how I
did
got
good.
started.
You were top 10, it looks like.
Was I? I thought it was 12th.
You were 12th overall, and then you were 10th male.
Age,
So
yeah.
diversity.
Oh,
That's
cool.
yeah.
No, that was when I was
73 hours. Was that at this point 73 hours? I guess that was your longest time on feet and going without
Yes,
sleep, right?
it absolutely was. Yeah, it was by a considerable margin the longest time. But man, I loved the 200 milers, and I still love the 200 milers. And
How was that experience, like going from the 100 to 200 in the race? Did you experience a lot more lows? Did you get sleep fatigue? And I mean, we know how, just going from that distance, how much different it is trying to plan your sleep and nutrition and everything else.
well, I mean, so the thing you should probably have figured out from my story so far is that planning is not a strong suit of mine, at least with regards to planning levels of exertion. And this was no exception. I went into this 200 miler and I ran it like it was a 100 miler. And I got to mile 105, which is the Heavenly Aid Station, and I thought I was going to die. And I ended up staying at Heavenly for something like 4 hours and just feeling like how I was having the biggest pity party. It was pretty pathetic. And I was miserable, and I was hating life and hating the
Marathon.
race and hating Tahoe and has anything that was or any other thing that was within view, I was hating it. And I finally I got myself up and just started trudging down the trail to the next aid station. And that section, that 20-mile section between Heavenly and the next road that you run across there is like one of my lowest points I've had in any race of any sort. I don't think anyone passed me, nor did I pass anyone. It was just lonely, and it was the end of the day, and it was like crossing over into night, and I just zombie walked a 20-mile section, and then I got to that end of that section, and I just fell back asleep, again, and I spent an hour and a half at the next aid station, and the whole rest of the next 30 miles after that. So after the mile 105 stop, the next 50 miles was crawling out of that hole that I had dug for myself. And it wasn't until I got to this particular aid station where I was starting to come out of it, but I was really still rough around the edges. And I got into this aid station, and this is the story I tell about how good the aid stations were at the 2017 Tahoe. I got into this aid station. They put me in a recliner. Someone came up and took a personal pizza order, which they proceeded to go over and cook.
Oh, wow.
And two medics looked after me, and I took a 45-minute nap. Then I ate pizza and left. And let me tell you, I ran the last 50 miles of that race like it was a 50 miler. I was brand new again after that king's treatment I got at this aid station.
Yeah,
So
that's pretty awesome.
That is
And
pretty
even
good.
get your own pizza cooked for you.
And your
yeah.
feet cleaned up.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
I mean, a lot of
Seeing,
people don't even want to touch other people's feet. That's pretty good.
oh, medics are a unique breed. They're special folks.
I bet you were missing those guys at Ball State.
I was indeed. It's fun. Like I tell that story because it's like at that time in 2017, I was still pretty new to long distance racing, but even so, like you could tell that when you went to one of those 200s, it was just a different experience than other places. It was like you were listening to music and everyone was making music by like, banging a stick on a skull, just kind of tinking along, and then someone comes along and starts playing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony in the middle of it, and you're like, wait a second, hold on, what is this person doing? Why are they so much? It was that much better than the other experiences. It was pretty amazing, and now luckily a lot of the rest of the ultra world has learned from all these things that were brought to it by the 200s, and now the quality of races is just so much better across the board. It's much harder to get away with the kind of stuff people were getting away with back then, but yeah, I still look fondly upon that first Tahoe.
Well, and then so you jump into the Bigfoot 200. You've done several hundreds in between that, but
Hmm.
at what point did you decide that you were going to go after the 100-mile record?
Yeah, well, there's a section in if you're stalking my Ultra Sign app, you'll see a point when I think I did 11 weeks and 11 races. It was a couple of 50Ks, a couple of 50 milers, 400Ks, and then Cruel Jewel at the end, as sort of the cap of that sequence.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when I realized that like I could really thrive in just a racing every weekend situation, where I really realized that something about me, I had this ability to recover in time to just go immediately into the next thing. And I even thrived in it like that. I took second place in that Cruel Jewel, like
See
with
that?
a
It's impressive.
27-hour finish.
A lot of elevation in that race.
33,000 feet. So got a lot of it. Yeah. So yeah, I could not only survive, but I could kind of thrive by just constantly keeping myself racing.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me think, well, I wonder if I could do that same thing with 100 milers. I wonder if I could do 100 milers back to back. And so you'll see that when I did Bigfoot, it wasn't just Bigfoot, it was High Lonesome, Ouray, Bigfoot in 3
Wow.
weeks, which that's about 100,000 feet of climb in 3 weeks.
Mhm.
And that was like my confirmation. Like that was like, okay, I really can do this. I really can do a lot of these straight out. And that's when I started to kind of plan and say, well, what's the upper limit of this? I said to myself, what's the record? 41. Why 41? That's a stupid number. Why did someone run 41 in a year? That couldn't have possibly been planned. And later when I talked to Ed, I found out it wasn't planned. It was just what he could fit in. Like he didn't set out to say, I'm going to do 41. He just set out to do as many as he could. And Ed's not as much of a logistics dork as I am. So when I started to do that, I was like, I'm going to do 50. And to be able to do 50, I'm going to plan 54. And to be able to do this, I'll need to do X, Y, and Z. I'll need to make, such and such plans. I'll need to. So, like, amongst other things, one of the things I did is I zoned my races. So I said, okay, well, where are the most races happening in the spring? Turns out the answer is the South. Where are the most races happening in the summer? Turns out the answer is Colorado or the kind of the mountains. Where are the most races happening in the fall? Against the South. Where are the most races happening in the winter? Southwest and California. Those are the places where you can get the most bang for your buck with the least drive time. So I was living in a van at that time. So what I would do is I would say, okay, well, when I'm in the South, where can I be? Answer turned out to be pretty easy. Atlanta. Atlanta is so centrally located with regards to everything else. You can get to, you know, 6 or 7 other states within a 2-hour drive, and you can get to most of the races in the South within that same amount of time. So I spent a lot of time in Atlanta. I spent a lot of time in Colorado. I spent a lot of time in like Arizona with living with relatives in Arizona. I would move to where the races were, and to ensure that actually worked, I really had to plan that part of it. That was the most logistically heavy portion. So yeah, I spent 8 months of logistical planning doing that. The
So
logistical planning was much harder than the running.
doing all those races leading up to that, how did you do that with your work? Like, how would
Yeah.
training like that, getting ready for it with your work?
Yeah, so I was very lucky in that regard. I worked for a company that was in the fitness space, but fitness software, and I was a data scientist for them, and so I could work wherever I could access my data.
Mm,
Um, I was also additionally lucky in that though we were based in California, we had an office in Atlanta. So when I went to Atlanta, I could just go work in the office. I was not even a remote employee at that point. I was actually working in a formal office that we owned. So, so yeah, I mean, part of it was that I could be remote when I needed to be, but the other part of it was that I didn't need to be remote most of the time.
mm,
Um,
okay.
I probably burned more PTO than I actually had. Uh,
You made up for it the next year. We know you did.
yeah, no, I worked plenty. There's no issue with me working, but man, did I. And then ironically, they laid me off the next year. So, it all worked out well in the end.
Well, was you able to stay pretty positive during the process? Was there any point? I mean, I guess your numbers are going up definitely and so forth like that. But 50 doesn't give you a whole lot of having a bad week time. When you
It
plan
does
for
not.
54, you plan for 50, you can't really get to Wednesday and be like, I just don't know about this. I mean, what did you do to keep yourself like, no, we have to do this. We have to show up Saturday or Friday and get this going.
I mean, you've already said the answer, which is we have to.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you mean? It's not an option. You don't have to like it, but you have to do it. And that I had so many days that were like that, where I was like at the start line, I was just like, God, I don't want to be here right now. Oh my God, please I'm just gonna sleep through the first half. Just wake me up when I hit 50. And you kind of learn to do stuff like that, where you just totally turn off your brain and just chug along. But yeah, no, the lows towards the end especially were pretty frequent. You just didn't want to be there and didn't want to be running that particular race. And the only reason you kept doing it was because you had to. Yeah, if you're gonna break the record, you got to just keep doing the thing. Like this, it's not a choice. You don't give yourself, if you're smart, I should say, if you're smart, you don't give yourself the option of thinking anything but I have to do this. Because the
Yeah,
moment you think
I picked up,
otherwise,
I picked up on very early in this conversation when you said you wanted to lose weight, you signed up immediately for a gym membership. So I mean, I'm already seeing that Walt's like he's not a guy that procrastinates. If he says he's going to do something, like it has to happen right then. And I can see that just from looking at your races. Like you went to Western States and you got hooked immediately. You signed up. You were ready to roll.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
I mean that's a quality that we all kind of need. I mean, some of us say we're going to wait till tomorrow, and then tomorrow never happens. So I admire that, Walt. I love it. If you're going to do something, you just go do it right then. Start
Do
it.
it.
It's the only
Yeah.
way it's going to happen.
And I've always believed that you can't rely. I mean, you asked about like, how did you have low day? Yeah, heck yeah. And that's part of why I'm just convinced that motivation is like the great deceiver. You're never going to be able to rely on motivation. Motivation waxes and wanes. Um, the way that you make this work is you make habits out of things. You have the things that you do. You have the things that you need to do. I mean, yeah, it's cool when you can be motivated. Motivation certainly makes things easier, but it can't be the make or break.
Yeah.
You have to create systems that incentivize your behavior. You have to create habits that disallow the questioning of the thing that's good for you, right? You know what's good for you. You know what you need to do. Create the habits that make it happen. Don't rely on your motivation. Don't go when you feel like it. Go because that's the thing you do right now. Like it's one of the reasons why I actually, despite having lived in a van for a very long time, this is going to sound weird, but I like a rigidly organized life, and in a way, a van facilitated that so much. A van had you'd get a setup going. Like when I was in Atlanta, I looked up a gym, I found a gym, I joined a gym, and every evening when I would go, I would get up, or every morning I would get up, I'd walk from the nice area of town where I parked my van to work, and then I'd go to work. During lunch I'd go down, I'd ride the Peloton, I'd come back up, and I'd go across town, across Piedmont Park to the gym after work, and I'd go back to Midtown, I'd get dinner, and I'd go back to my van, and I'd go to sleep, repeat. And that was it. This was the thing I'd do, and there was never a question of like, oh, do I go to the gym? No, of course I go to the gym. This is the time I go to the gym. It's gym time. It's after work. Yes, I'm tired. Of course, I'm sore from just having run a 100-miler that weekend, because every weekend is running a 100-miler. But like, you don't stop. You have a pattern. You follow the pattern, and that following of the pattern, that making of habits out of everything, was what allowed me to keep my sanity, for one, during that time, but also just keep myself from just kind of going to pot. Like, I had worked hard to get good fitness before that time, and as cool as it is to run a 100-miler every weekend, it's not a workout. It's not it's a breakdown is what it is. And if you don't keep your fitness up in other ways, you're just going to find yourself continually sloping down over the course of the year.
Yeah, and if all you're relying on is motivation, you'll never finish.
Yeah, motivation.
You got
quick.
That's dedication and discipline is what that is, And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, motivation will only carry you very short term. The rest is on you to figure out why you're doing it.
Yeah.
So over the course of this record and the 50 milers, the 50 100 milers, what did that feel like in the end? Like when you hit your goal? Like, I can only imagine the emotions of this last race. Like, how did you feel?
There's those times when you get any good thing, when you get like really good news that you've been waiting on for a really long time, or when you find out, you won a contest, or got your name chosen in a lottery or something like that. There's always there's that moment of just like nothing could bring me down off this plateau. There's that plateau and you're on it, and a meteor could fall out of the sky and kill your best friend at that moment, and it would still have trouble dislodging you from your spot, because you've worked so hard for so long for this thing, or you've been looking so forward to this thing, that it's just, it's everything you wanted. So yeah, that was what it was for me. For me, there was a I look at pictures of myself with there's a few pictures I have of one of like when I actually hit the 41st, which was like, okay, at the very least I've tied the record, and the 42nd, which is like, the record's mine now. And then I have a picture of myself sitting at across the years when I finished the double at across the years, because it really did come down to the wire. I had a double scheduled for across the years. That is to say, I would run 100 miles, turn in my bib, get a new bib, run another 100 miles. And I was hoping I wouldn't have to do that, but I had DNF'd something in December, and so it came down to the wire. If I was going to make 50, I had to do a double on that terrible concrete course, and I had to do it, and I put on that final bib, and I was just running, and I finished, and I can't even, I could not, like, I'd have to have cut the muscles to get the smile off my face. Like, I could not have stopped smiling, and the pictures of me definitely show that from that time. And I just have to think about it to remember how I felt. I was beyond happy. And of course, that's a tough thing to come off of, right? You know, you accomplish something like that. You can imagine that January and February were weird. Um, God, what do I do with my weekends?
Well,
I have
and,
them
and
again.
and during the course of this, the one thing that we've not talked about is that you were competing with two other people.
Yeah,
There was
yeah.
three people competing for this
Hmm.
100-mile record.
Yeah, those
And
three people being myself, Michael Ortiz, and Billy Richards.
yeah.
Yes.
And what I love about this story is that you could have stopped any time before 50 because you'd already gotten the record. Those guys didn't get as far as you did, but you stuck to your goal, man, and that's awesome. Like, you didn't give up, and like you said, you had to do two at the end back to back, and that was all your choice.
Yep.
I mean, dude, that's resilience. That's just and discipline and dedication, and that's absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you for that. I don't. To me, it doesn't feel that amazing because it just felt so inevitable at the time. Like, no, I had this goal. I didn't plan to do 48. I didn't plan to do 49. I planned to do 50. 50
Mm-hmm.
was, I called the thing the half hundreds from the very beginning. Like, it was baked into the name of the thing that I was gonna do 50. And so for me, the the doing of the 50 was so centrally important, and it had nothing to do with Ortiz. It had nothing to do with Billy. You know, those two. If I had found out that like that Billy was going to hit 55 or something in the year, like still not sure that would have changed my plans at all. I'm not competitive enough where that would have driven me to do more. The struggle was with myself, and the struggle was with the number that I had set for myself.
Did you
So,
guys talk during any of them? I mean, I guess that they have
oh yeah,
different.
oh
Okay.
yeah, totally. So like at first, I didn't meet either of them for a little while at first, and the only way I found out about them at first was that people kept mistaking me for them. Um, oh, you're that guy who's doing the lots of hundreds this year. So you're Michael Ortiz? No, I'm not Michael. Who's Michael Ortiz? Oh, he's this guy who's trying to break the record for the most 100 milers. And I'm like, oh no, oh goodness, what is it? What's gonna happen now? So
Billy
that
carried the
worried me at
flag, didn't
first. But then I met Ortiz and found out he's just a fantastic dude, and we ended up running a bunch of races together. And heck, we just ran another race this last weekend together. He's just a cool guy, and I don't think I could like another runner more. And then I met Billy finally, and Billy's a character, man. Billy, first off, he runs every one of his events holding an American flag.
Yes.
Still does.
Still does, yeah. So, and due to his hip issues, he can't really do ultras, but he's changed his focus over to OCR. So he's doing Spartan races now, and he's currently setting the record for the most Spartan trifectas in a year, which I think he actually did. I think he actually broke that record before December. So,
wow.
yeah, the dude's just I mean,
Yeah, and I
he's
saw he
covered.
had posted something on that because he was carrying the flag in it. He
Yeah,
has not let that down one bit. He takes that flag with him to every Spartan race.
absolutely.
Man, that'd
Well, I
be
mean,
hard to do during that.
the man is as close to Captain America, I think, as you get. I mean, he's a former Army and Marines, spent time in both, and clearly like relished his time there. He's now a personal trainer, stays in amazing shape. Um, and what was great was we finally got a chance in November where we all were at the same race at the same time. And we decided, why don't we just do this whole thing together? And we ran every step of that race together. We did the whole
Yeah,
Miami 100.
that's awesome.
And there's some great pictures that came out of that, but more importantly, we just had some fantastic conversations. And I got to know Billy a lot better during that time, and we all got to help each other through our low points. And like there was no animosity there whatsoever. I mean, not at any point, but especially not towards the end. Like we all just were just stoked to be out there, and again, it's just the ultra running community being the ultra running community. Like,
Right. This community is so special. It doesn't
yeah,
matter where you
absolutely.
go. You just meet amazing people.
Mhm.
So Walt,
Absolutely.
let's skip forward a little bit.
Mhm.
We've covered hundreds, we've covered 200s. Now let's jump into the 300. I, we all want everybody to hear the story of Vol State because it's just, man, if you need some motivation, listen to this story because it's absolutely amazing.
And this is where we first met Walt.
Yeah, and this is where we
It
met
is.
Walt. So
Yeah.
we're actually doing the pre-race dinner.
Well, I'll sit with him on the bus the whole time.
Yeah, well, we're doing the pre-race dinner, and that's when we find out that Walt has set the 100-mile record. So we've been talking to him on the bus, and we've spent time with him all the way to the restaurant, and then we're doing the pre-race dinner, and then that's when we start really finding out who Walt is. And we got to run with Walt a little bit, and Walt left us for a little while, and then we caught back up to Walt and got to spend some more time with him in the race. And Walt is probably one of the most resilient people I've ever met in my life because this story is just,
I'm glad you used the word resilient.
I still can't believe you. I mean, me and Mike and Matt still talk about, we still can't believe you finished the race. We didn't know. We were hoping you would, but we were also excited when we saw you post that picture at the very end in your flip-flops.
So,
baby.
So there's so I'm glad you used the word resilient because I use considerably less charitable words about myself. I mean, so I went into that race wearing big fluffy shoes, and I'm a heavier runner. I'm like 170, and which for a runner, it's not light. And I have a very plodding step on longer races, and kind of hunched over and got the Hunchback of Notre Dame thing going on, and just sort of eyes towards the ground, steadily moving forward. And Vol State is hot and miserable, and that pavement gets very hot. And I think what happened is over the course of that race, as we were moving on, I think my shoes just disintegrated. Like the foam just couldn't take it over the course of the time, and this big cushy fluffy shoe that I was wearing just began to get worse and worse and worse, and the only thing that was really holding its shape was the arch wedge that they put in the center to kind of give you a little arch support. And so eventually I went from a shoe that probably had a 4 millimeter drop to something that felt more like a stiletto as my foot sort of melted around this central arch. And the result was every time I took a step, it was just slamming my toes directly into the ground, just over and over and over. And, I was putting up with it for a long time, but it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And right about when we get to War Trace, right about there, on the outskirts of War Trace, still along the part that has the spray painted markings for the strolling gym course, I can't take anymore. Like I cannot even step another step in these shoes, and I take them off, and I start walking in my socks down the road, and it's just hot and miserable.
Is this during the day or during the night?
It's during the day, yeah.
Okay.
It's during the day. So
that
I'm
concrete's
walking,
like 100 degrees.
Probably 114.
I would think it's probably more than that. It's hot, and I end up like doubling up my socks just so I can like step on the ground. So I'm just walking down the road in my socks. You can't run in that, but let me tell you, for the first about a mile, it was the most pain-free I had been in 100 miles in that race, because that's a War Trace, like what, 104, 65 miles in or something like that.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So I'm trying to just not die. Just don't know if I can go further. I'm thinking to myself, I'll just find an Angel Station. For those who don't know, so Vol State, being 314 miles and unsupported, it's been running the same course for 30 something years. And so the people who live along that course have started to set up impromptu aid stations for the runners. It's actually one of the things Laz seems to be a little bit ornery about. He doesn't like how supported it's getting these days. But trust me when I say that the runners are very grateful for every single aid station, and we love all those people. Because when I came over a hill, as the day was kind of winding down, as I came over a hill and saw in this beautiful green field a tent set up I don't. It could have been, you know, it might as well have been heaven or a buffet or heaven with a buffet because that's what it looked like to me. It was just there were chairs, there was shade, and I was so happy. And I sort of plod my way over across the grass in my socks, and I sit down, and I'm just miserable. I'm tired, and I kind of like doze for a little bit, and I the whole time I'm thinking like, is this the end of my race? Right? I don't have shoes. I can't. I have 100 miles left to go in this race. I can't go without shoes. Like it's a core competency of running is having shoes. Yeah, I know there are barefoot runners out there, but they prepare for years for that, and I'm not a barefoot runner. So I'm just, I'm getting down on myself, and I'm wondering what it's going to look like if my race ends here, and just getting lost in my head. And um, and the people come out who live there, which is Vince, and I always forget what his wife's name is. Um, so I'm sorry, Vince's wife. I cannot remember your name. Um, but these people were fantastic people. They kept me
Yes, they were.
company.
Yes,
They gave us food.
they
You
had
know,
everything. They were
oh
awesome.
my God, yeah, they were amazing. They brought out like leftovers from their dinner, and you guys arrived, and you guys took your time, and then you guys left, and I was still there because I was in misery,
Yeah.
and
Well,
it's like,
your feet looked awful, though. I mean, I
yeah,
understand why you were in misery. You just walked
um,
how many miles barefoot?
yeah, yeah. I had walked at that point like close to 10, I think, and
Now, 10 miles in full sunshine on
mm,
pavement.
And that
yeah,
wasn't
no,
that wasn't the flattest section right there either, going
no,
through.
Wartrace is definitely one of the more
Well,
hilly
keep in
sections, but
mind,
it's also
we
pretty.
had
It's
Facebook
also
stalked you all, earlier in the day. Me and David had, because that's what really keeps a lot of us runners going. We would be like,
yeah.
okay, who's dying, who's not dying, where are they at, And so when me and David logged on earlier that day, I'm like, Walt is in socks, It's like, how can you do this, And so we're just like, there's no way he'll finish. There's just no way, I mean, you just sit there and think, like you had said, you have to have shoes. Like that's given. And so when we come across you, it was me, David, Crystal, and E-Man, and we're like,
Mhm.
there's Walt. It's just like this new life we saw with you.
Well, my favorite post of you though during this time was Plan A has turned into Plan B. Plan B is turned into Plan C. Plan C has turned into Plan D. There is no plan at this point.
Well, here's the hilarious part. I ended up finishing in front of my plan C in the end. Uh, but so to finish off this story here, um, so they're like, we might have some flip-flops that you might be able to use. I think we have something sitting in the closet, and so I'm like, okay, cool. I'm down with that. I'm like, it's I mean, at the very least, I can walk to the nearest city or something. I don't know. I know there's a Walmart somewhere down further, and maybe I can get some shoes there. But like these flip-flops, it's better than socks.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I end up doing is I have my double layer socks, and what I did is I took the outer layer and I cut like the toe slot in the outer layer, but not in the inner layer. And I put on these flip-flops, which are like the cheapest Walmart brand flip-flops. Like they're knockoff like Sanux, and they fit terribly because they're not even my size. Like they weren't purchased for me, so they're not my size. Um, they're someone else's size, and they got this like rough pebbled surface on the inside that just feels like knives on my feet when they're so tender. And I was like, whatever, whatever, and I just start shuffling down the road, and over time, like once you get used to that, it becomes a thing. Like you can really like shuffle along steadily with those things. It's not ideal, but like you can survive. In fact, because of that, I bought myself running sandals. Like I realize if I'm gonna run Vol State again, I may do the whole thing in running sandals, precisely because of that experience. Like they were terrible, and I tore them to shreds, but I literally still have those flip-flops. I still wear them to this day. Like, in the end, they did what they needed to do. They got me to the finish line, and I looked like very meth chic at the end there, but like, nevertheless, that I was able to shuffle my way to the finish line, and which in the end was about it was like 90 miles in flip-flops in the end.
When you say
With
shuffle, were you doing like a 13-minute, 14-minute mile, or what were you
gosh,
trying to do? Or were you
sure
more
lady
like
jest, right? No, towards the end, if I was doing 2 miles an hour, I was happy. That's how I was calculating things. Just do 2 miles an hour, man. That's all you got to do to finish it. Just do 2 miles an hour. So that's how I was calculating it, and just hoping I could keep that up. And yeah, and the only time I went faster than that was at the very end when I realized I might still finish sub 6. I can do a sub 6 day. And I booked it up that last hill, got out my trekking poles and was clunking along with my trekking poles and my flip-flops, looking like the world's weirdest hiker. I yeah, I probably got the
I
cops
would
called
like
on
to
me a
point
few
out you
times.
did go past numerous stores, but those flip flops still seem to be the best idea to keep
I
them.
went into numerous stores and I checked numerous places, but I have duck feet. Like I can't wear most shoes. I have, normal dude shoes are D width. Wide is EE. I'm EEEE. I'm 4E width. So I can't just like grab shoes off of a rack and just put them on. If my shoes mess up, I need a specialty shoe store, and they'll still need to special order them. So I'm out of luck. So yeah, flip-flops turned out to be not just the best thing, the only thing. There was nothing else along the course that could have even moderately sufficed. So
So, like, mentally, was this one of the hardest races for you with all that happened, or do you still have one that's harder?
the spine was still harder. Yeah, the spine was even mentally. Um, there was a there was a point when I actually nearly died in the spine, um, due to hypothermia and um, like just lack of clear thinking. I was to the point where and like in the spine, because of the weather extremes, little mistakes can kind of snowball out of control. So what I had done was I had gone past one of the checkpoints, and at one of the checkpoints they had offered me food, and I kind of I just ate a little bit of it, and I decided to just move on. And that was the dumbest mistake I could have made. I really should have eaten all of the food. I should have, asked for seconds if I could, because as soon as I started into that final section, which, this was the last checkpoint before the finish, but it also is the section that goes through the Cheviots or Cheviots as they call them there. And that section is very exposed, treeless, high winds, everything's frozen, and there are safety huts dotted along the way because you can die out there. And I'm to the point where I can barely function. My hands don't work. I'm freezing, and I'm just trying to get to the first hut. And I was so delirious that I walked by it. Like it's the only thing that's
Oh
out
no!
there. It's directly on the course, and it's lit up. And I was so delirious. I walked by it, and I thought what I hallucinated was I thought I had walked by a tree, but there's no trees out there. There's just none. And so I got past and I thought, why was there a tree? I haven't seen a tree in like 150 miles. I should probably. And as I turned my head and looked back, it was the safety hut. And luckily, there were search and rescue people also taking shelter in the safety hut, who proceeded to look at my freezing ass and said, "You're not going anywhere. You sit down over there. You eat this. No, you can't go to sleep because you're gonna die." So yes, I got very lucky. That was the one I finished too, for the record. That
Oh
wasn't my
wow!
DNF. That was the one I finished. Um,
You know,
and yeah,
I think you actually told me this story while we were running on that first day. 'Cause
I
I
did.
remember this. I think you actually told me that, and yeah, that's crazy. That's wild.
Yeah. So the spine, yeah, I consider the spine to be one of the hardest things I've ever done. I really love it for that reason, and I want to go back as many times as they'll let me. But I also want to do Vol State kind of as many times as they'll let me, and as many times as I can make it work. I also want to do the whatever they're calling the Triple Crown of 500 Ks. What was it they called?
Third Circle of Hell was the last one.
No, I'm trying to remember what they called. Was it Kenny? Was it who won? I'm trying to remember what
Yeah,
it was. The Emperor of Stupidity, I think it was.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, I want to try for Emperor of Stupidity. That sounds like a title I am suited to hold. So
Well, you're definitely a resilient man, so I'd put my money on you, Walt.
well, thank
So
you.
over the course of 135 races is what your ultra sign up says. And I already see a stack of races you've signed up for next year. A couple couple 200s, couple hundreds. So
I
normal
got my
Walt
first
fashion
400
here.
coming up next year too.
Do what?
I got my first 400 coming up next year too.
Awesome.
So
So
on an
you're
ultra
doing
sign up.
backyard ultra. You doing a last man
Yeah,
standing?
yeah, I'm terrible at those though. All of my uh, don't give a crap comes out in backyard ultras. Last time I got to 100K and I was like, I've had my fun. I think I'm gonna go sit in a warm tent and eat some of the pizza they got there. That sounds way better than going out on another lap.
A
So
lot of
I
people
got to
use
do
them.
100 miles this year.
I'm saying a lot of people use them for training runs or to
Yeah.
hit 100 miles. But
Yeah.
over the course of 135 races,
Mhm.
what do you think has been the biggest takeaway from you from those as far as being successful, and what have you learned? Like, in order to accomplish what all you've accomplished, you've had to, obviously fail and succeed. So throughout those failures, for the people that's listening, especially new runners getting into 100 milers, what have you learned? Like, what has helped you the most?
Mhm. Well, I would say one of the just most basic things you can say about the 100-mile plus distance is that everyone starts too fast. Period. Like it's the easiest thing to change, and yet it's the hardest thing to actually, like, or I should say, it's the easiest thing to describe the change that needs to occur, but it's the hardest thing to actually do. Because when you're out there in the beginning, you feel great and you just want to run and you just want to move, and you've trained so hard, and you've just come off of a taper, so you're feeling all peaked, and you know just don't. Everyone goes out too fast no matter what. Um, and that was the source of my few moments of amusement toward the end of my 50 hundreds, was watching everyone just take off like gazelles at the beginning of the hundreds. And I'm like, I'll see you later. I'll see you later. I'll see you later. That guy's in the lead. I'm not going to see him. Whatever. But um, yeah. But it was a great source of comfort in a way, because it was the one sign I had that I was like that I was really becoming more mature as a runner of very long distances, was that I knew exactly how fast I had to start finally. It took a lot of races to realize that. Um, so that's one. Two is that it's always going to suck sometimes. Like, your best race sucks sometimes. Some people have had the perfect race that they never have low moments, but my God, never rely on that. You're out there to do a job.
Between
Yeah. You're out there to do a job. You dedicated yourself to this. You put your name in the hat a long time ago. You had all your training time. Now you're here. Now, good or bad, you're just gonna keep going. And the reason, there are great reasons to stop. I'm not going to be one of those people that says there's no reason to DNF. There's fantastic reasons to DNF. Things like injury, things like aggravating something that if you keep going, it's going to turn into something serious. Like, these are the things you have to learn. Ultra runners know about pain, but more importantly, they know about new pain versus old pain, right? Or familiar pain versus unfamiliar pain, right? Those moments where you're like, oh, that's a pain I need to pay attention to, versus, oh, that's just that same old BS I've been dealing with every day of training. You get to know your body so well, and that's something that only kind of comes with time. But point being, the reason I was saying that was because when you're actually out there, unless you run into one of those reasons, you're just out there to finish. You if you're feeling like crap, it's gonna pass. I mean, you may feel like crap again, but like just keep pushing. Um, if you did it right, then then what you're doing in the race is not necessarily the hard part. What you're doing in the race is the culmination of all the hard parts you had in that training. All those miserable times when you like wound up lying on the ground because you could not literally stand up anymore. Um, all those times, those were the hard parts. Now you're here to do this. Now you just have a job. Now you should be executing a plan. So, yeah, I guess that's like the idea that taking into it this idea that you're executing a plan, I think is really important for new runners. Um, you should have an idea of exactly what that race looks like, from beginning to end, of times you should hit, of ways you should feel, and you should be following that. Um, it's going to feel, if you're doing 100 miles right, it's going to feel weirdly easy for an uncomfortable amount of time. You're going to want to run faster. You're going to want to be exuberant. You're going to want to sprint a hill, or you're going to want to, but no, you're executing a plan here. And yeah, kind of rambling now, but point being,
no, I mean,
yeah.
and that's a great advice is to, I do it, Matt does it, Mike does it. I'm sure you still do it on occasion, but we all start too fast. We all start too fast. You spend all this time working towards your goal, and if you don't put that work in, then you shouldn't have an expectation walking up to the finish line. But if you do put the work in, and you're up every day and you're running and you're putting your mileage in, and you get up on that finish line, just like you said, you've tapered. You feel like Superman standing up there at that finish line, and like there's some joy in like saying, all right, people are getting ready to chase me.
Yep.
and you just take off too fast, and 20 miles in, you're like, oh, I screwed up.
They've caught me now.
Kind of like you in the 200 miler. You said 100 miles in, you're like, oh, bad choice. And you can't take that back once you've done it.
No.
Yeah. But it's important to know also that it's not the end of the world, right? I messed up that first 100 at Tahoe, and yet still finished pretty well. 73 hours, nothing to sneeze at when it comes to a 200 mile. That's the other joy of long distance racing, right? Is that like it's an adventure, and you mess up one of the things that kind of ticked me off about marathons was you run a marathon and you need to take a pee break, and you may have just blown your PR, and you're never going to recover from that. Like it's measured, your PR is measured in seconds because everything's so deeply predictable. Ultras aren't like that. Like you can crash out, feel like you're going to die, feel like you're just the worst piece of crap ever, because oh, I should be better than this, and you're laying by the side of the trail and your calves are locked up, and then in like an hour you're back on course, and you're maybe even still ahead of your goal time. Like it's the weirdest thing, but the important thing is just to never give up, and just unless you're injured, just keep pushing at it.
Yeah, just short of an injury, everything else you can almost turn around. Yeah. You just can't let yourself get into that dark space of where you're not going to fix it. And that's where we all get stuck sometimes. Your mind can talk you out a lot of things, but just like after that marathon, you ate that cookie and you were ready to go, and sometimes it can be that simple. It can be that simple. But man, when you're living it in that moment, you can't think about that cookie. If she wouldn't have forced you to eat it, you wouldn't have ate it. And you'd have been miserable for hours.
Yeah.
And that's where you need someone like at that station to say, sit down, eat this soup. You're not going nowhere, and sometimes we don't get that tough love that we need. And we need that, sometimes you just need a little food and your whole race will turn around.
Well, and it's the trite but absolutely true expression that we don't run even ultras alone, right?
Right.
There's our support network of our family. There's a support network of the volunteers. There's a support network of the, you know, even an unmanned aid station can make all the difference in the world, right?
Yeah.
We're not solo creatures even at our most solo. Someone made the approximately 8,750 Southern biscuit breakfast sandwiches that I ate over the course of all state. you know, um,
Don't let the sun drop.
yeah, I mean, I just think it's important. Yeah, I think that's the other thing we have to kind of recognize is kind of keep gratitude in mind and
Yeah.
keep in mind that we're not doing this alone, that we always have, that there's someone to lean on, that there's someone to take support from, and be thankful for that support when you get it.
I
So,
think that's one thing
Yeah.
we've all learned and implemented into a lot of our races. We don't like to let anyone, and me and Matt have given ourselves to David numerous times, like, you were in control of me.
Yeah.
If we start talking like we are done, we before the race starts, we say we are yours. When we almost require that of our runners now. When they come in on certain races that we do and put on, it's like, give me 15 to 20 minutes just to talk to you. Sit right here. Let's talk this out. When you just, like you said, you're just amazed at how you can turn everything around.
After the race, you get people that come up and say, "Hey, thank you so much for pushing me and not letting me stop here. Because now look, I've went extra, X amount of miles more than what I even thought I could do." And then that's pushing them, and now they're like, "I'm gonna do it again. Now I know that I can do this, and now my next race I can do this." And like Mike said, when they come in at the finish line or back around at the start or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, I'm done." And then you're like, "Are you sure you're done?" "Well, yeah." You give them 5 more minutes and like, "All right, I'm going back out. I'm going." And we saw that a lot this year at the fort, like a lot. It was great to see.
Well, and the other thing to think about when you're lining up at like 100 mile or 50 mile or anything, any ultra, I mean, you also don't know what everybody's going through either, and that's what's pretty humbling to me when you finish races and you start learning people's stories and you learn why they're running or why they showed up for this race. And sometimes they've never even ran, but they showed up to this race because they got a sick relative and they wanted to change their life, or they want to lose weight, or, and have never ran a race. And to see someone like that finish, and I mean, that's where it goes back to like the trail running community in general, like especially ultra running. I mean, everyone is celebrated. Everyone, and that's what's so special about this is like, you can be first or last. It doesn't matter. Someone's going to be there cheering you on to the finish, and you're going to get treated the same way the first place person was, whether you're first or last. And that's what I love about this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean the ultra world is full of stories, and that's been like one of my favorite parts of it is that everyone has one, and they're all great. Like even the most mundane ones, they're great because everyone came to this weird thing we do through some roundabout way, through some set of bad or questionable life choices, through some set of and I love it. God, I love it so much. And yeah, I if it wasn't for that, this wouldn't be nearly the draw, this central focus of my life that it's wound up being, right?
I mean, it truly can change your life, and it's a good thing. I mean, it's definitely made me a better person, and it's definitely made me a more resilient and tougher person, and I think in the long run, it does that to everybody in a way. It makes us learn how to deal with problems in the moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you a chance to accept failure.
Yeah.
Walt, I got one last question for you, and then we're going to turn it over to Matt. He's got the list of questions from listeners. Now, I'm trying to give him a few minutes because he'll lose this list.
I'm ready to go.
He started opening this at the start of the podcast.
I got
he just
him.
never
Don't lose him.
But, my last question before we turn it over to Matt: what does recovery look like for you? Like, do you plan anything specific, or do you just roll with it? After 100 and something races, especially doing 50, 100 milers, did you learn anything from what worked for you?
I mean, to me, recovery depends on what you're recovering towards. For example, when I was running the 50 hundreds, I had to come up with like a day by day. What does Monday look like? What does Tuesday look like? What does Wednesday look like? What does Thursday look like? And the goal behind that string of days was for me to keep my body from dropping into the recovery mode. So Monday would be a full day off. Like I would just have nothing, full day off, just chill, hang out, do whatever. But Tuesday, back in the gym, weightlifting, a little bit of stationary bike. Wednesday, completely back to normal. So for me, normal during that time was at least one spin class a day, one weight class per day, and probably about 5-ish miles of either walking or running. I did a lot of walking during that time because, well, didn't really need to run any more than I already was. 100-mile weeks are fine, thank you. So I just ended up doing a lot of walking. But yeah, I would just, it went like that. It was a off, half, full.
Yeah.
And,
with some active recovery. I mean, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I would not recommend that for anyone who's not trying to do that same thing because there's just no point to it, right? Give yourself more time than that. Nowadays, if I'm not going to race again anytime soon, I'll usually do 2 days off rather than 1 day off. But then the progression will kind of be more or less the same. Like yesterday, after Devil Dog, Devil Dog was Saturday to Sunday, Monday day off, Tuesday was back in the gym, did a bunch of stair mail, did full legs, and today I did a 10K with the dog, and then after this podcast recording, it's back to the gym for me to do more work. So I don't know. I don't like. I just don't. I don't know. I need to keep it part of my life every day. It's part of my sanity. It's part of my joy. It's part of just as importantly, it's what I do. It's evening.
You've made it a habit.
Yeah,
You've made it a habit, and it's part of who you are, and it's part of your life, and it probably is an emotional like release for you too, like to help you deal with anything that's going on in your life. I mean, a lot of us, that's how we got into crazy ultra running, was trying to figure out something in our life.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. Release is a good neutral term for it. Crutch, also a good word. Jackie can be like, you're being a real jerk right now. Can you just go work out or something? Like go for a run or something.
Yeah,
you're a total jerk right now. Grumble, go run. I'm fine. So
you're back to
I'm right there with you. I completely understand. I think we all are.
Yep. Yeah. If I don't get my run in for a couple of days, I'm like, man, I'm going crazy. I've got to get out here.
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely.
Man, I've got one question for him before you dump into yours, and it may be on the list, but I just got to know, was there something or one particular item or something there in the 50 races that you was like, well, if that wears out, I have to go get another one identical? Was there anything benign as a headband, a hat, or anything like that? And you don't have to give brands or anything like that, but was there something that you just like, this is my go-to right here, that you just carry every single race?
Yeah, like I survived on wearing Skins tights, and it was really awkward because I love Skins tights, and Skins tights went bankrupt in 2018, not 2019, 2018. So I was running this in 2019, trying to collect sets of tights from a now defunct company where the dregs of them were available on Amazon, and that led to some stressful moments. And I still have some of those pairs, but a lot of them have like gigantic holes all through the insides where like my thunder thighs like rubbed holes in them, and holes in the crotch and all this stuff. They're torn to shreds. But if I had run out of Skins over the course of that year, I don't know if I would have finished, because my goodness, I couldn't run anything else by the end.
So all we know from this podcast is Walt has big feet and big thighs.
Big thighs. Everyone just knows that. They just see me. I've had people literally tell me. In fact, I had this happen at the last race at Devil Dog over the weekend. They didn't say, "Hey, I recognize Walt up ahead." They said, "Hey, that's Walt's legs up ahead." They literally said that. Yeah, it's Walt's legs.
Take that as a compliment, Walt.
Cool.
You've earned those. All right,
So,
Matt, we'll take us off with some questions.
All right, we're going to do a couple of Vol State questions here to
Cool.
begin. What was the hardest part of Vol State?
So if you don't count the little, like, the hardest part mentally was the section where I didn't know whether I was going to finish because my feet, my shoes had just failed, and like the whole concept of going without my shoes just seemed so ridiculous. But there was a worse time from like a mental state, and that was we were going through this town, and we had just finished this section, and at this point I was running with two other runners, and we were going through this town, and we had just finished this long section where there was so much roadkill that the road literally smelled of death, right? And you couldn't get out of your nose the whole section. And we get into this little town, and this little town, it's like it's really early in the morning, and this town is just empty. And all there is are these like random dudes drag racing through the center of town. Like literally, it's these dudes just peeling around town, and they were the only cars moving. And otherwise, it seemed almost like a ghost town. It was very weird. It was like a standard southern town, light enough in the morning to be full bright, but the only things moving in this town were these cars peeling through the center of town. And we get to the edge of town, and there's a dead cat in the middle of the road. And this dead cat looks like it died while sitting up in the middle of the road. And at that point I was like, I'm in a horror movie. I think I'm in a horror movie. I think I must be dreaming. I can see that Stephen King wrote this section of the race. This is just the right kind of weird. I'm in an empty, abandoned town, and there's a dead cat in the middle of the road who's sitting up. I don't understand what's going on right now. I want to be elsewhere. And I look over, and I of course I think it's a hallucination. So I look to the runner next to me, and she goes, "I don't think that cat made it." And I'm like, I think you're right. Yeah, so that was my low point right there. Yeah.
Okay. Who since you actually got to run with all three of us during this race,
Yeah.
who whined the most out of us three?
Oh,
Can you believe someone
guys-
wanted us
they-
to ask you that question?
They did. Somebody
Well,
very
You can,
close
you
to
can
us.
ask. You can answer it honestly. We don't care. We all
no,
whine.
you guys aren't whiners. I don't know what. That's not even an answer. I don't remember any of you whining at all. No.
I ran with Walt
Perfect.
early, so I hadn't got to the whining stage yet. So this was me and Walt was like the first 75 or something.
Yeah, everything's
Yeah.
good, just sunshine
so it was
and
good at
rainbows
that point.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember fine.
No one whined. See?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah,
Nobody
no,
whined.
we found a
Nobody
nice little
whined.
place to sleep, and it was like, no, I felt like everything was going right when we were running together. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Vol State compared to other 200 plus milers.
Okay. So goodness, Vol State's nothing like a 200 miler. I mean, it really just isn't. Like it's days and days longer. That difference between 200 and 300 miles is the difference. It's the longest 100 is that last 100, of course. So,
Mhm.
you know, yeah, you're going to be out there at least 2 days longer than just about any other 200 miler, or 1 day longer if you're, Ken Zamak and you're fast, or Bob Hearn and you're fast. But, for us non-fast folks, you're going to be out there for a long, long, long time. The unsupported thing makes it kind of interesting, but I've done other adventure races, and in that sense, it doesn't feel terribly different. There's no comparison between that and something like, say, the Tahoe 200 or Moab 200, where you're going to, like, you couldn't do the Moab 240, for example, in the same way that you do Vol State, because you're not running along a highway. There's no support. You don't see another human who's not involved in the race. You never see a gas station. So how would you support yourself for that kind of distance? So the Triple Crown of 200s and other 200s that are like it are much more concierge experiences. You know, you feel like you're running aid station to aid station, and the aid stations are predictable. They were on the map ahead of time. You knew a lot about them. There was not a lot of surprises. Vol State feels like, oh, just keep your options open. Eat when you can. Who knows what's ahead? Yeah, you saw something that was on the map, but maybe they're closed. Maybe you get there at midnight and nothing's open in this tiny town, and you're gonna have to run until 8 o'clock in the morning when things start to open again. You know,
Or you find a Waffle House.
where you find a Waffle House. Yeah, I didn't find a Waffle House that entire time, but let me
I
tell
didn't
you,
either.
I did find a little diner, and it was literally the morning after the first night with flip-flops. I strolled into a diner at 5 o'clock in the morning. Literally, they had just opened as I was running by them, and I ordered like 5 things off the menu there and proceeded to just down every single one of them while I got weird looks from the local farmers who were also the only people up that early and eating breakfast at the diner. So those were great moments, and those kind of moments define what makes Vol State worth running.
They do.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so going to your 5,100 milers here, how much did that cost overall?
Right around $30,000. So it was about $12,000 in race fees. The rest was between travel and other expenses like that.
So
Wow.
$30,000, and well,
That's easy.
is
That's
why
easy
he
because
got up every Saturday morning.
yeah. No, I spreadsheeted every aspect of it, so I knew the costs even before going into it. Because I'd even done the dumb stuff like I had made a spreadsheet that used the Google Maps API to create distances between every single race, so I could even approximate gas fees. So like I knew going into it what I had to have set aside. And so yeah, it's a pretty easy thing to answer.
Yeah, I mean, well worth it though.
oh
I mean,
yeah,
that's something you'll never forget for your entire life, and you met amazing people during that journey. So
Well, and I've said it once, and I'll say it again now, because I already have Jackie on board for this. But I said, you know what? If no one's beaten this thing by 2029, damn it, I'm beating it myself. I'm gonna aim for 55.
Yeah,
So
right. There's
so
plenty of
yeah, if
races
no one
there.
does this by 2029, that's my next goal. Because someone needs to step up and beat this darn record. Records aren't supposed to hold for any period of time. This is meant to be broken.
That's a great attitude to have. I really like that.
yeah. Okay, well, let's see. Moving on here. While running so many races over your short but long career of running, what was the most unique race you've done?
The most unique race I've done. The spine is really unique in its own special way. Part of it is just the fact that it's on one singular trail the whole time, and that every aid station is a hostel that they've taken over. So like it's a literally a whole big building that you go in where they have the entire kitchen taken over, and they'll cook you custom orders, and you know you have showers and personal beds and all this stuff. So that's pretty unique in its own way. It's hard to beat that because they are as unique as their location, right?
Yeah.
You never are going to see a place quite like you see it on foot. So it's actually why I almost never look at a race course before I'm gonna go run it, because I wanna experience it the first time when I'm out there. I want to know as little as possible, as little as I need to know to keep myself running, basically. So like I tried as much as I could not to look out the window on the bus in Vol State. I didn't want to see these places. I
Well,
wanted to
I
be
know. I
surprised.
looked over at one point and Walt was gone. He was asleep for like it seemed like a very long time. Which I mean, we all fell asleep during that.
I was gonna say that was a long
bus
You
ride,
needed to sleep.
but Walt fell asleep early. He
Yeah.
was gone pretty early.
I just didn't want to know. It was a my own like joy defense mechanism, I guess you might say, protecting my joy in discovery. So
Okay.
I'm kind of that way with ultra sign up.
Oh.
I don't ever even look at the runners that are in the race.
yeah, just be surprised.
Yeah, I just sign up and whoever's there is there. So
Nice.
Okay. What is your go-to nutrition and hydration?
The one thing that's kind of weird about me hydration wise is I never drink water. Like I literally just won't. I
Does this stem from that first marathon?
um yeah, right. No, I mean, I'm a very salty sweater. When I'm sweating, I'm sweating like, you know, oceanic water. I get crusty and salts everywhere. So if I'm not also taking in electrolytes with my liquids, I'm gonna wash my electrolytes out really quickly, and my legs are gonna lock up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always drinking some electrolyte solution. Um, doesn't matter what it is. But as a race goes on, I do like to skew towards pure electrolytes and less like Gatorade and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I, I skew from sweet to salty or sweet to savory over the course of a race, and towards the end, I don't want anything sweet at all. Even my drinks, like I will I'll have a little Coke occasionally, but for the most part, what I'll do is I'll like get the most bland electrolyte drink they have, and if it needs to be strengthened, I will literally like crack open a salt tab directly into the reservoir, which I've done on many occasions. So, yeah. Food wise, I'm lucky to have a cast iron stomach. I can eat whatever. You just hand me whatever. I've run on cheeseburgers. Love running on cheeseburgers. Run on pizza. Love running on pizza. That's how I finished my. Jackie delivered me a Papa John's pizza at like loop 3 of Devil Dog this weekend, and I just every time I came into that aid station, I'd eat 2 more slices and I'd run back out, and I felt like $1,000,000 for a while. So no, I can eat whatever.
Oh, okay. Since you've ran all over the world pretty much, we'll keep it in the United States, but what is the hardest race, East Coast or West Coast?
Hardest race, East Coast or West? Well, okay. So I'm going to compare distance to distance. So I'm going to say like, what is the hardest 100 miler? Because you can't really compare a 100 miler to a 200 miler, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. So the hardest 100 miler I've run, this is going to sound weird to say, but it's probably Angeles Crest, and not because it's particularly hard, as in a like, oh, you may um like you may not finish it, but if you're not going to finish it, it's because it has a ridiculously short cutoff for how difficult it is. It's a 33-hour cutoff for a race that, by any modern standards, if it was a modern race that started up 5 years ago rather than 40 years ago, they would give it a 40-hour cutoff, no question. So the fact that it has a 33-hour cutoff makes it difficult. Also, I'm very bad at heat, especially the kind of heat that the West Coast has, which is just pure, exposed, ugly, sunny heat that just takes everything out of you. And there's nothing else but that in Angeles Crest. Angeles Crest is never cool. It is never mild. It is never pleasant. It's always, screw you, I'm Angeles Crest. Here's 105 degrees, and the air isn't moving because you're deep in a canyon. Like it's always unpleasant. There are many races where I feel like if I pushed hard, I could do a sub 24. I've done a sub 24 on some extremely difficult races. It was all I could do to do a sub 30 at that. Like it's
Wow.
it's an immensely difficult race.
Wow.
And people who do sub 24 there are unique and beautiful creatures, and I do not know how their internal organs function in that weather.
Okay, so with that being, I guess, the hardest West Coast race, what would you say the hardest East Coast race was?
And this is one of those things where I'll have to say that I have not done enough East Coast races to where I even feel like I have meaningful input. Like, I think all of the East Coast races I've done have had their ups and downs. I'd say Cruel Jewel is the toughest that I've done on the East Coast so far. But then I hear about races like, like the Cut, or like Jigger Johnson, or like all of these other amazing races that I really desperately
we
want to
just
do.
lost a really good one. It's the last year, but Blood Rock. This was the last year they're doing
This
it.
is the last year on Blood Rock. Oh, bummer. Oh,
Yep,
that's a
they
bummer.
just finished it this past weekend. One of our friends ran it. He finished it, but yeah, last year, because he never got it into. He started that race so it would be a hard walk qualifier, and it never got approved, so he finally got rid of it, and now he's starting up a 200 miler, which is called
Yeah, Southern
Southern
States.
States. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
We're gaining a 200 miler, but we lost Blood Rock, which was pretty hard race.
it was. It to me, like Blood Rock was made difficult by its extremely unique time of year, which is to say, it was early enough where all when I did it at least, all the leaves had just fallen. And under all of those leaves, with no real indication, um, because they were so freshly fallen, was the most rocky, ugly, technical, nasty ass course.
But
And
you
so
couldn't
you
see.
never knew what you were. It's like running. It's like blindfolded running down a technical trail because you never know what your feet are going to hit. And so if the only solution was just to go slow and pray, I can't imagine what the elites had to go through. Like Jeff Browning won it the year that I ran it, and like I can't imagine how destroyed his feet must have been because the only real solution I could even think of was just to slow everything down to a crawl. That was a tough race. So yeah, I'll agree. Blood Rock was a tough one.
Well, I think that's all I've got.
Well, very
Cool.
last question from us, Walt. Why do you run? What's your why?
I run because I love it. I mean, and in fact, I don't even think people should run unless they do. I have people that like tell me all that, like they hear about that I run a lot and they hear about how I run and what I do and they say, "Oh yeah, I want to run to get in shape." And I'm like, No, stop right there. One, running is an absolutely horrendous way to get in shape. Do not run to get in shape. You're just gonna beat the crud out of yourself, and if you don't like it, you're just not gonna like it, and you're not gonna do it. Find your thing that you love and do it. There's plenty of things that you can love and get in. Like I love boxing, and that's way more likely to get me into shape than running. But I love running. Like I train and I do all the cross training and other things like that. I hate my time on the stationary bike. I really don't, you know, dig some of the things I do at the gym, but you know what? I do it all because the running is the dessert, right? The running is the thing that I get to do that I reward myself with at the end of all of that. Um, and that feeling of freedom that you have when you're out there, when you're just moving, like when each stride feels natural and you don't have to think about it, and you feel like human in a way that it's hard to feel in other ways. Like driving is not a particularly human experience. Like driving is not humanity affirming in the way that running is. Even for me, like cycling is not humanity affirming in the way that running is. Like running is human powered with so little mitigation, right? It's just you, and it's just your legs, and everything that you're doing is just you powering yourself. And there's an intoxication and a beauty, both an aesthetic and a sort of a conceptual beauty to that I just, ooh, gives me chills just thinking about it. So yeah, I run because I love it.
I can't tell you're a little bit passionate about it.
No.
Just a little.
Nah.
No, that's awesome. I mean, you're right. You have to love it, and especially to do what you've done. I mean, you're a very accomplished runner. You have an amazing background here of 135 ultras that you've completed. I mean, and that list is only going to grow. So we can't wait to see what else you do and have you back on here. I see that you got Cocodona 250 coming up and a race I've never even heard of, Kansas Crazy Train 200, Rails to
Well,
Trail.
I think that one's actually going to be canceled, sadly. So it's going to be canceled Kansas Crazy Train. I think it's going to turn into a 100. Yeah, because there was a little bit of apparently some shakeups over at the organization for that race. So that might turn into a 100. But my big thing for me is that I'm trying to get to 100 100s in this coming year.
Nice. Yeah, so are you going to do anything special when you accomplish 100 100s?
Well, I mean, I would hope the race itself is special because it's my first 400 miler. So,
Okay.
so that'll be fun, and it'll be in Switzerland. So,
Oh, wow.
so yeah, going to Switzerland, running 400 miles. I think I'm going to call that special.
That'd be pretty special.
So,
Well, Walt, we're
yeah.
going to have you back on here when you accomplish that. We want to hear the whole story.
Yeah, I mean, how about this? Even if I DNF it, I'll try and have a very good story to tell.
There you go.
I have a feeling that all your stories are pretty good, Walt.
Well, I can tell you're very passionate. I've enjoyed listening and having you on here for sure because you can give data and everything. I don't think you run a race by just chance. I think whenever you can tell you're a runner that definitely puts your heart into what it is. When you remember elevation and who wins and stuff like that, it tells me you really study and you have fun at what you're doing, and I want to thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. This has been very fun.
Yep.
Yeah, Walt, thank you so much for being on our podcast, and we truly appreciate it. And you're a great ambassador for the sport, and we're just so glad that we could have you on here and share your story.
Thank you guys.